The horse had gotten away safely. It was the hay cart that suffered the most damage. Bolting recklessly from side to side down the road, the blinkered animal failed to see the twin stone gate posts on its right. Skidding crazily, the cart smashed up into the uprights. There was a loud splintering of shafts as the horse careered onwards, trailing in its wake tracers and shattered timber. His lightning reflexes serving him well, Clooney leaped clear. He landed cat-like on all fours as the hay cart upended in the roadside ditch, its buckled wheels spinning awkwardly. Feeling braced after his mad ride and the subsequent narrow escape, Clooney strode to the ditch's edge. The distressed cries of those trapped beneath the cart reached his ears. He spat contemptuously, narrowing his one good eye. "Come on, get up out of there, you cringing lout of cat's meat," he bellowed. "Redtooth, Darkclaw, report to me or I'll have your skulls for skittles." Clooney's two hench-rats pulled themselves from the ditch, shaking their heads dazedly. Crack! Slash! The whip-like tail brought them swiftly to his side. "Three-Leg and Scratch are dead, Chief. Dead as dirt. The cart crushed them, Chief." "Stupid fools," snarled Clooney. "Serves them right. What about the rest?" "Old Wormtail has lost a paw. Some of the others are really hurt." Clooney sneered. They'll get over it, and suffer worse by the time I'm done with them. They're getting too fat and sluggish by the tripes. They'd not last 5 minutes in a storm at sea. Come on, you dead and alive ragbags. Get up here and gather round." Rats struggled from the ditch and the cart, frantic to obey the harsh command as quickly as possible. They crowded about the undamaged gate post which their leader had chosen as a perch. None dared to cry or complain about their hurts. Who could predict the mood the warlord was in? "Right, cock your legs up and listen to me," Clooney snarled. "First, we got to find out where we've docked. Let's take a bearing on this place." Redtooth held up his claw. "The Church of St. Ninian's, Chief. It says so on the notice board over yonder." "Well, no matter," Clooney snapped. It'll do as a berth until we find something better. Fangburn, cheese thief. Here, Chief. Scout the area. See if you can find a better lodging for us than this heap of rubble. Trail back to the west. I think we passed a big place on the way." "Aye, aye, Chief." "Frogblood, Scumnose, Chief. Take 50 soldiers and see if you can round up any rats that know the lie of the land. Get big, strong rats, but bring along weasels, stoats, and ferrets, too. They'll do at a pinch. Mind now, don't stand for arguments. Smash their den so they don't have any homes to worry about. If any refuse to join up, then kill 'em there and then. Understood? All clear, Chief. Ragear, Mangefur, take 20 rats and forage for supplies. The rest of you set inside the church. Redtooth, Darkclaw, check the armor. See if there are things about that we can use as weapons. Iron spike railings. There's usually enough of them around a churchyard. Jump to it." Clooney had arrived. Matthias had never stayed up all night in his life. He was just a bit tired, but strangely excited. Great events seemed to have been set in motion by his news. Immediately upon being informed of the hay cart incident, the abbot had insisted upon calling a special council meeting of all Redwall creatures. Once again Cavern Hole was packed to the doors, but this time it was for a purpose very different from the feast. Constance and Matthias stood in front of the council of elders. All about them was a hum of whispers and mutterings. Abbot Mortimer called order by ringing a small bell. "Pay attention, everyone. Constance and Matthias, would you please tell the council what you saw tonight on the road to St. Ninian's?" As clearly as they could, the badger and the young mouse related the incident of the rat-infested hay cart. The council began questioning them. "Rats, you say, Matthias? What type of rat? Inquired Sister Clements. Big ones, Matthias replied, though I'm afraid I couldn't say what kind they were or where they had come from. What about you, Constance? Well, I remember that my old granddad once knew a sea rat, she answered. Going by his description, I'd say that's what they looked like to me. And how many would you say there were of these rats? Father Abbot asked. Couldn't say for sure, Father Abbot. There must have been hundreds. Matthias? Oh, yes, Father. I'd agree with Constance. At least 400. Did you notice anything else about them, Constance? Indeed I did, Father Abbot. My badger senses told me right off the bat that these were very bad and evil rats. The badger's statement caused uproar and shouts of nonsense, pure speculation, and that's right, give a rat a bad name. Without even thinking, Matthias raised a paw and shouted aloud, Constance is right. I could feel it myself. There was one huge rat with a ferret's skull on a pole. I got a good look at him. It was like seeing some horrible monster. In the silence that followed, the abbot rose and confronted Matthias. Stooping slightly, he stared into the young mouse's bright eyes. Think carefully, my son. Was there anything special you noticed about this rat? Matthias thought for a moment. Everyone was watching him. He was much bigger than the others, Father. What else? Think, Matthias. I remember. He only had one eye. Right or left? Left, I think. Yes, it was the left, Father. Now, can you recall anything about his tail? I certainly can, Matthias squeaked. It must have been the longest tail of any rat alive. He held it in his claw as if it were a whip. The abbot paced up and down before turning to the assembly. Twice in my lifetime I have heard travelers speak of this rat. He bears a name that a fox would be afraid to whisper in the darkness of midnight. Clooney the Scourge. A deadly hush fell upon the creatures of Cavern Hole. Clooney the Scourge? Surely not. He was only some kind of folk legend, a warning used by mothers when youngsters were fractious or disobedient. Go to sleep, or Clooney will get you. Eat up your dinner, or Clooney will come. Come in this instant, or I'll tell Clooney. Most creatures didn't even know what Clooney was. He was just some sort of bogey that lived in bad dreams in the dark corners of imagination. The silence was broken by scornful snorts of derisive laughter. Furry elbows nudged downy ribs. Mice were beginning to smile with sheer relief. Clooney the Scourge, indeed. Feeling slightly abashed, Matthias and Constance looked pleadingly towards the Father Abbot for support. Abbot Mortimer's old face was stern as he shook the bell vigorously for silence. Mice of Redwall, I see that there are those among you who doubt the word of your abbot. The quiet but authoritative words caused an embarrassed shuffling around the council of elders. Brother Joseph stood up and cleared his throat. Good Father Abbot, we all respect your word and look to you for guidance, but really, I mean... Sister Clements stood up smiling. She spread her paws wide. Perhaps Clooney is coming to get us for staying up late. A roar of laughter greeted the ironic words. Constance's back hairs bristled. She gave an angry growl and followed it up with a fierce bark. The mice huddled together with fright. Nobody had ever seen a snarling, angry badger at a council meeting. Before they could recover, Constance was up on her hind legs having her say. I had never seen such a pack of empty-headed ninnies. You should all be ashamed of yourselves, giggling like silly little otter cubs that have caught a beetle. I never thought I'd live to see the elders of Redwall acting in this way. Constance hunched her heavy shoulders and glared about with a curiosity that set them trembling. Now you listen to me. Take heed of what your Father Abbot has to say. The next creature who utters one squeak will answer to me. Understand?" The badger bowed low in a dignified manner, gesturing with her massive blunt paw. "The floor is yours, Father Abbot." "Thank you, Constance, my good and faithful friend," the abbot murmured. He looked about him, shaking his head gravely. "I have little more to say on the subject, but I see that you still need convincing. Here is my proposal. We will send 2 mice to relieve the gatehouse. Let me see. Yes. Brother Rufus and George, would you kindly go and take over from Brother Methuselah? Please send him in here to me. Tell him to bring the Traveler's Record volumes, not the present issue, but the old editions, which were used in past years." Rufus and George, both solid-looking, sensible mice, took their leave and with a formal bow to the abbot. Through a high, slitted window, Matthias could see rosy pink and golden fingers of dawn stealing down to Cavern Hole. As the candles began to flicker and smoke into stubs, all in the space of a night, events had moved from festivity to a crisis, and he, Matthias, had taken a major role in both. First the big grayling, then the sighting of the cart. Large happenings for a small mouse. Old Brother Methuselah had kept the Abbey records for as long as any creature could remember. It was his life's work and consuming passion. Besides the official chronicle of Redwall, he also kept his own personal volume, full of valuable information. Traveling creatures, migratory birds, wandering foxes, rambling squirrels, and garrulous hares, they all stopped and chatted with the old mouse, partaking of his hospitality, never dreaming of hurting him in any way. Methuselah had the gift of tongues. He could understand any creature, even a bird. He was an extraordinary old mouse who lived within the company of his volumes in the solitude of the gatehouse. Seated in the Father Abbot's own chair, Methuselah took his spectacles from a moss-bark case, carefully perching them on the bridge of his nose. All gathered around to hear as he opened a record book and spoke in a squeak barely above a whisper. Me Lord Abbot Cedric. It is Cedric, isn't it? Oh, botheration. You'll be that new abbot, Mortimer, the one who came after Cedric. Oh, dear me. I see many of them come and go, you know. Me Lord Abbot Mortimer, and members of Redwall. I refer to a record of winter 6 years back. Here the ancient mouse took a while to leaf through the pages. Ah, yes, here it is. Late in November, year of the small sweet chestnut, from a frozen sparrowhawk come down from the far north. Peculiar chap. Spoke with a strange accent. I repaired his right wing pin feather. News of a mine disaster caused by a large savage sea rat with an extraordinary tail. It seems that this rat, Clooney they called him, wanted to settle his army in the mine. The badgers and other creatures who owned the mine drove them out. Clooney returned by night, and with his band of rats gnawed away and undermined much of the wooden shoring. This caused the mine to collapse the next day, killing the owners. Brother Methuselah closed the volume and looked over his glasses at the assembly. I have no need to read further. I can recite the other misdeeds from memory. As the hordes of Clooney the Scourge have moved southwards over the past 6 years, I have gathered intelligence of other incidents. A farmhouse set alight. Later that same year, piglets, an entire litter eaten alive by rats. Sickness and disease spread through livestock and herds by Clooney's army. There was even report brought to me 2 years ago by a town dog. An army of rats stampeded a herd of cows through a village, causing chaos and much destruction. Methuselah halted and blinked over his spectacles. And you dare doubt the word of our abbot that Cooney the Scourge exists. What idiotic mice you are, to be sure. Methuselah's words caused widespread consternation. There was much agitated nibbling of paws. Nobody could doubt he spoke the truth. He was already old and wise, when the most elderly among them was a blind hairless mite, puling and whimpering for a feed from its mother. Oh, my whiskers, what a mess. Hadn't we better pack up and move? Maybe Clooney will spare us. Oh dear, what shall we do? Matthias sprang to the middle of the floor, brandishing his staff in a way that surprised even him. Do? He cried. I'll tell you what we'll do. We'll be ready. The abbot could not stop shaking his head in admiration. It seemed that young Matthias had hidden depths. Why, thank you, Matthias, he said. I could not have put it better myself. That's exactly what we'll do. We'll be ready. Clooney the Scourge was having nightmares. He had lain down in the church mouse's bed for a well-earned rest, while his army was going about its allotted tasks. He should never have tried to sleep on an empty stomach, but weariness overcame his hunger. In Clooney's dream, everything was shrouded in a red mist. The cries of his victims rang out as barns blazed and ships foundered on a stormy Red Sea. Cattle bellowed in pain as he battled the pike that had taken his eye. The warlord thrashed about, killing, conquering, and laying waste to all in his dream. Then the phantom figure appeared. At first it seemed a small thing, a mouse in fact, dressed in a long hooded robe. Clooney did not relish meeting with it. He could not tell why, but the mouse kept getting closer to him. For the first time in his life, he turned and ran. Clooney went like a bat out of hell. Glancing back, he saw all the carnage, death, and misery he had caused in his career. The big rat laughed insanely and ran faster, on and on past scenes of desolation and destruction wreaked by him. Clooney the Scourge. Floating through the red mist, he could see the strange mouse hard on his heels. Clooney felt himself filled with hatred for his pursuer. It seemed to have grown larger. Its eyes were cold and grim. Deep inside, Clooney knew that he could not frighten this oddly garbed mouse. Now he was wielding a large, bright sword, an ancient weapon of terrible beauty. The battle-scarred blade had a word written upon it that he could not make out. Sweat dripped from Clooney's claws like stinging acid. He stumbled. The strange figure was closer. It had grown into a giant. Clooney's lungs felt as if they were bursting. He realized that he had slowed up and the mouse was getting closer. He tried to put on the extra burst of speed, but his legs would not obey. They ran more and more slowly, more and more heavily. Clooney cursed aloud at his laden limbs. He saw he was trapped in deep icy mud. For the first time he knew the meaning of mindless fear and panic. He turned slowly. Too late. His enemy was upon him. He was rooted helpless to the spot. The avenging mouse swung the sword up high. A million lights flashed from its deadly blade as it struck. Bong! The loud toll of the distant Joseph bell brought Clooney whirling back from the realms of nightmares to cold reality. He shivered, wiping the sweat from his fur with a shaky claw, saved by the bell. He was puzzled. What did the fearful dream mean? Clooney had never been one to put his faith in omens, but this dream, it had been so lifelike and vivid that he shuddered. A timid paw rapping on the door snapped Clooney from his reverie with a start. It was Rag-Ear and Mange-Fur, his scavengers. They slunk into the room, each trying to hide behind the other. knowing that the poor results of their search were likely to incur the chief's wrath. Their assumption was correct. Clooney's baleful eye watched them as his long, flexible tail sorted through the paltry offerings, which had dropped from their claws. A few dead beetles, 2 large earthworms, some unidentifiable vegetation, and the pitiful carcass of a long-dead sparrow. Clooney smiled at Ragear and Mangefur. With a sigh of relief, they grinned back at him. The chief was in a good mood. At lightning speed, the big rat's claws shot out and grabbed them both cruelly by the ears. The stupid hench rats yowled piteously as they were lifted bodily from the floor and swung to and fro. In a fit of rage, Clooney bashed their heads together. Half senseless, they were hurled towards the doorway, with his angry words ringing in their skulls. "Beetles, worms, rotten sparrows, get me meat, tender young red meat. Next time you bring me rubbish like this, I'll split the pair of you and have you roasted in your own juice. Is that clear?" Mangefur pointed an accusing claw at his companion. "Please, Chief, it was Ragear's fault. If we'd gone across the fields instead of up the road. Don't believe that big fat liar, Chief. It was him who suggested going up the road, not me. Get out!" The scavengers dashed off, bumping clumsily into each other with panic as they tried to get through the door together. Clooney slumped back on the bed and snorted impatiently. Frogblood and Scumnose were next to report. They bore news that cheered Clooney up somewhat. They'd obtained over 100 new recruits, mainly rats, but with a good scattering of ferrets, weasels, and the odd stoat. There had been some who needed convincing. These had been press ganged by a savage beating from Frogblood, coupled with the threat of horrible death. They were soon convinced that the wisest course was to enlist in Clooney's horde. Others were hungry nomads, only too willing to join up with the infamous Clooney. They were greedy for plunder and booty, and pleased to be on what they were sure would be the winning side. Lined up in the churchyard, the recruits were supplied with weaponry by Redtooth and Darklaw. Impassively they stood in ranks, waiting the warlord's inspection. Clooney nodded his approval. Scurvy rats, hungry ferrets, sly weasels, bad stoats, exactly what he needed. "Read him the articles, Redtooth," he snapped. Redtooth swaggered back and forth on the churchyard paving as he recited the formula from memory. "Right, eyes front. You're in the service of Clooney the Scourge now, me buckos. Desert and you'll be killed. Retreat and you're under sentence of death. Disobey and you'll die. I'm Redtooth, Clooney's #1 rat, and you will obey the word of your captains. They take orders from me, and I take orders from Clooney. Remember that. Now, if anyone, two, or a group, or even all of you together want to try and beat Clooney and lead the horde, this is your chance." Without warning, Clooney charged headlong into the new recruits, lashing out wildly with his scourging tail. He bowed them left and right and center with his massive strength. Baring his teeth and slitting his eye, he whipped fiercely away until they fell back and scattered in disorder, hiding behind gravestones. Clooney threw back his head and roared with laughter. "No guts, hey? Ha, it's just as well. I don't want dead uns on my claws before I find a proper battle for you to fight. And make no mistake, when the right time comes, I'll see you fight. Aye, and die too. Now raise your weapons and let's see if you know who your master is." A motley collection of evil-looking implements was framed by the cloudless sky as wild cries rang from the newly inducted recruits. "Clooney! Clooney! Clooney the Scourge!"